Hello, on today's episode of the Leadmore Podcast, I'm here with my brother, my bro founder, Scott Meyer, the founder and CEO of Chipp.ai. I call him my bro founder. I don't know if everybody knows this, but in 2009, when I first became an entrepreneur, my brother and I moved back home to South Dakota. We started a business called 9Clouds, and we were helping businesses get online, use this new Web 2.0 internet, get on social media, communicate with their customers, create content. It was a big wave at the time. I don't think we even fully realized what we were starting, just figuring out how to be an entrepreneur. And when it comes to waves, I think a wave even bigger is getting ready to break. And that, of course, is the wave of AI. And that's what we talk about in today's episode of the Leadmore Podcast. Scott does a great job of taking complicated things and making them a little bit easier to understand. And so we dive into one framework he calls the AI sandwich, which helps you understand how to interact with AI to get the most out of it. So it's not just a fancy, shiny object. It actually can be productive for you. And we go through sort of the skills or the tactics to be better at prompting. Prompt, of course, is how you engage or ask the AI to do the task you're looking for. And then Scott takes us through a little framework, a 2x2 matrix that helps you understand when and what tool to use for AI, when an open AI tool is perfect, and when you or your company or team might need to graduate to more of a specific tool or use case, depending on how you need to use it. So that's our conversation today. Catch up with my brother, hear about what he's doing in the AI space with his company, Chipp. And you're going to learn some frameworks to help you actually use AI in a meaningful way and not just a fun play around with type of thing. So that's today's episode of the Leadmore Podcast. Let's get right to it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Leadmore Podcast. A repeat guest. Last time we were actually talking about DAOs. Remember DAOs?
I do.
On to the next thing. I think this one might be maybe a little more traction, probably a little bit bigger here. So my brother, my old bro founder, my still brother, Scott Meyer, co-founder, CEO of Chipp.ai. What's up? What's new?
I am running fast, helping people use AI. Someone told us that we are AI for people who hate AI, so I really like that. I think
nice.
We're helping people not miss, a tool that they need in their arsenal. So excited to talk about it.
Who are the people that hate it when you run into folks? Like, is it just the techno resistant, or is there something about it that you get most often?
I'd say mostly just techno resistant, people who don't like to learn new things or don't want to learn new things. And then there's like a sliver that are like afraid of the apocalypse too. There's a little sprinkle of that, but mostly it's just, people get tired trying to keep up and integrate another thing. And so at Chipp, we say we're just trying to promote AI for all, like let people do this stuff without having to even know they're using AI is kind of the trick.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue because I think, 15 years ago, so almost 15 years ago, when we became entrepreneurs in 2009 and started a company together, 9Clouds, our goal was trying to explain to people what then was called Web 2.0, sort of the social web. Then we did this, 2 years ago about sort of Web 3.0. Didn't quite stick that way. But this wave, I've heard this is the kind of the coming wave is the book that I just read. But so let's talk about how we can have AI for all and how we can simplify. So you have some good frameworks that you teach as you were, what led you to this company idea was helping people embrace AI.
Yeah, I spent about a year teaching developers how to use AI when they were coding. And we taught over 9,000 some developers at Proof of Learn and Metacrafters. And that's actually where I met my co-founder, Hunter. But, doing that really opened up my eyes to the importance of this for everyone, because you don't have to know code. You don't even have to know no code. You just really need to be able to talk. And so that means that all of us now have this superpower waiting to be unlocked. So the first framework I always tell people about is the AI sandwich, which I think is just a really simple way to know how to approach any AI tool. So whether it's ChatGPT or Gamma to make PowerPoints or Firefly to make images or whatever the next AI tool is, this is just a way to think about it and to hopefully alleviate the fear, which is every interaction with an AI tool is like a sandwich. It starts with a human. So you're the bread on top, right? You're going to ask a question. You're going to give it a description. You're going to tell it what to do. And then the AI is going to be the middle of the sandwich, the meat or the patty. and it's going to give you a response to your question. And it's
Okay.
much like a puppy. It just wants to make you happy, right? It's going to find an answer. So if you ask really broad questions, it's going to go off and hallucinate to find you an answer. And so that's why you have the bottom of the sandwich, which again is the human, the bread again. And the human has to take that AI creation, that output, and do something with it. Edit it, correct it, share it, and then it might become a club sandwich then, where you go back to the AI and you ask another question, right? So it's bread, meat, bread, meat, bread, and you're just doing this dance, what we call multi-shot prompting. So a prompt is just a question, and multi-shot means you're asking back and forth questions instead of just saying, write me an essay, and then taking what it gives you and turning it in for your essay, right? So
Okay.
I think most people are disappointed by AI because it's not necessarily just an easy button. It does take a little bit of back and forth. And the more you do that, the better the answers get. So AI sandwich.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. And how do you know when, like, is it going back to refine your initial prompt or question, or is it because you didn't go deep enough, or getting more specific, or like, is it with that dance, I guess, how much is reaction and how much is like, I didn't quite do it right. Let's take a shot at a new piece of bread, maybe.
Yeah. I think the first time you do it, it's going to be more iteration and
Okay.
changing based on the answers. And what should happen is as you kind of refine your sandwich, that then you know exactly what to say next time, right? And so we want to think about AI a little bit as like there's basic knowledge retrieval, like, hey, I want to make a story for my kids. Like that's pretty easy. But if there's tasks you're going to do a lot, like edit this podcast transcript into social media posts that are this long with this kind of emoji, with this kind of voice. It'll take some back and forth the first time or the first couple times. But what you should get to is that then maybe the fifth time, you don't have to have a club sandwich. You just have a hamburger, right?
Okay. And that level of specificity is good, right? Like more direction, more instruction
Yep,
in terms of
exactly. Yeah.
prompting.
Yeah. And that's what's beautiful about AI is that I don't have to go back through code to try to fix something. I just see what it puts out. And then I can change my language or my question to improve it and just see how it changes. Maybe it gets worse. Maybe it goes off the rails. And then I just change my question again. So this is kind of that permission to make mistakes and permission to just start, because the best way to improve it is to see what it does.
Yeah. So you said you don't have to know how to code. So if coding is, of course, ones and zeros, prompting is speech, right? And text,
Yeah.
and some of them are voice,
ABCs.
some of them are texting.
Yep.
So that's the art of prompting, which you said is your next framework. So we have the sandwich, which is like this go back and forth. Ideally, we're going to go from a big club sandwich down to a really nice burger once we really know what we're doing. But talk about this idea of being better at prompting and asking good questions. What's the art of prompting look like?
Yeah. So if you think about language is what drives artificial intelligence or AI, a good question is the key for a good output, right? And so a question, again, is we call it a prompt, which is just prompting the AI to do something. And a lot of people will actually refer to this process as prompt engineering. So just like you would engineer code, you will actually just engineer your prompt, which really is like copy editing or speech writing or something like that. So,
which I think those skills are pretty transferable, right? Like there's the fear of
totally.
like AI taking all these jobs, but really it's going to be the folks who know how to use language and use English or whatever language you speak.
I mean, think about if you're trying to create an image, you could say, make it like Renoir. But if you don't know who that artist is, you have to try to explain what their paintings look like, right? Or if you want to say, write it in the style of Bukowski, but you don't know who Bukowski is, and you try to explain that with language, that's really hard. And so actually having a deep bench of knowledge across disciplines really helps you, because you can speak to an AI tool with your previous kind of background, and it's going to understand you.
I suppose an analogy there would be like you commission a piece of art and the artist says, what would you like me to make? And if you say, I don't know, like something blue and nature, versus like, I want a Terry Redlin piece that is of my backyard or something like that. That's pretty specific of what you're looking for.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And that's what this framework gets to. So the framework that I recommend people using when they're asking questions, when you're prompting, is called the RIPE framework. So RIPE. And it stands for role, inquiry, parameters, and examples. So those are the 4 things a good question would have. So I'll kind of go through each one and explain how you do it. So if I'm going to ask ChatGPT a question, I'm going to use the right framework. The first thing I'm going to do is give it a role. So I'm going to say, you are an X doing Y for Z. So you are an SEO writer creating a blog post about leadership podcasts for middle managers in companies throughout the United States.
Sure.
And what that role is doing is just basically telling it how to talk, right? It knows kind of the language to draw on, the level or difficulty or, denseness of the language.
Yeah.
It'll pull examples that are relevant. So by just using that role and doing what I call the XYZ framework, so framework within a framework, but you are an X doing Y for Z, that's going to give you a really quick start that the voice is going to match closer. Because one of the biggest complaints is that, ChatGPT or AI sounds robotic. And the reason is because you're not prompting it correctly.
Yep.
So a role will help you do that.
So it's just like people saying, like, speak to, give instructions like everyone's a fifth grader. Not to say that they're not capable or smart enough, but like that's how we want to get instructions is like a fifth grader.
And we do that naturally. Like I'm writing an email to you versus, an investor. I'm going to use a different tone. So basically we're just doing the same thing for AI because they don't know for sure who we're trying to talk to.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so that's the role.
So we have the role. And then after that, we're going to give the question or the inquiry. So do A, don't do B, right? So you're an SEO writer creating a leadership podcast for middle managers. Write 3 paragraphs explaining leadership in AI. Make sure not to talk about artificial intelligence technically and more at a generative level, right? Okay. So basically, it's just what you're asking it to do.
So like, what's inbounds, what's out of bounds?
Yeah, write me an essay. Do it, don't do this, but do that. And the reason why you don't have to do and don't, but I like to put that in there because it just gets people thinking, an essay can mean lots of things, right? Or a memo or an email or a social media post, like create a LinkedIn post and do not include emojis or something like that, right? So,
and how much level of specificity there, like character count, or like, do we need to define what an essay looks like, or?
So that's where we'll get to next. So after we have the role and the inquiry, then we have parameters, and that's a great place to put all of that stuff. So make sure to do C. So make sure to sprinkle in emojis, make sure that it's less than 3 paragraphs long. One of the best use cases I find for AI is writing grants, and grants are notoriously specific on character count, on number of words or paragraphs, and how powerful is it to take something that already exists and just change it from 3,000 characters to 2,000 characters? Like that's not a good use of human time.
That takes a while. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. And so parameters are a great place to put those things. Parameters would be things like write it at a 5th grade level. Make sure you refer to our company as Leadmore, not the Leadmore Podcast.
Sure.
Use second person instead of first person, write it in Spanish, like whatever it might be. So parameters can get really big or it might be really small, but that's a really fun place to tweak. You can imagine the role and inquiry. You probably know what that is. Parameter, you can try different things and really change the output.
And this prompt, AI doesn't care how it's structured, right? It can just be, I don't know if it can be, can it be a run-on sentence? Do you need bullet points or like you just keep typing, right?
It takes anything you throw at it. I like to use Markdown, which is essentially like using the pound sign for headings. And that kind of, I find a little bit of improvement because it sort of shows the important steps.
It's like a different thought.
So I might do like pound role, pound inquiry, pound parameter. I also often will do step prompting, which we can talk about, but where it's essentially asking the AI to ask me questions. So that's another approach too.
Okay. So piece parameter, we got the role, we got the
inquiry and then
is what you need. Yep.
The example is the last step, which is the part that most people leave out. And I would say it's actually the most important step. And so AI is really good at, if you say you want A and it should look like C, it'll be really good at filling in B, right? And so what the example is if you've done the thing you're asking it to do, is just give it an example of what you've done, what a good email looks like, what a good grant looks like, what a good essay looks like, what a good memo looks like, whatever you're creating. So a great example of this, like with a grant, you might be like, here's an example of an introduction paragraph from a previous grant. Make sure to match the voice and writing style from this example.
Interesting.
Here's an email I've written to past investors. It should sound like this. Here's a joke I've told before. It should be no longer than this, stuff like that. So what's great about that is that eliminates the robotic voice, because now what it's doing is
It's matching.
you're training it on yourself. And so you're making a clone of John, right? And so by just including an example when you can, it's not always possible, it'll do a really good job. And those can be long. Like
That's what I was going to say. Does quantity matter there? Like it'll match better the more it has?
It'll match better potentially. Like I think there's probably a point of diminishing return, but I'll copy and paste like an entire blog post and say, here's a past blog post that it should look like.
Okay.
And I usually, if I can, I like to give 2 or 3 examples. If it's an entire grant, you might not want to do it. If you're using GPT-4, you get a 2,000 character limit, which essentially would give you like 5 to 7 pages. Now there's some, the new Google model called Gemini 1.5. It gives you 1 million tokens. So, people are loading like the entire book, The Great Gatsby, in it and adding one word, and it's able to find that one word in that entire text. So I think where we're going is like you can just throw anything in it, but you don't need to. I think 1 or 2 examples is fine.
Okay, so examples there. So quantity, or and this is just like a copy paste thing generally, or okay.
Yeah, and what's great is like as you do these, then your output can become the example for the next one, right? So if you do a good, a great specific example, you're a social media marketer creating a LinkedIn post for potential clients, write a post about our upcoming podcast, make sure to include emojis and a link to leadmore.com/Scott. Here's an example of a previous post I did.
Cool.
That's it. And that's the right framework. And that's going to give you a really good one. A lot of times in the inquiry, I like to give multiple options, so give me 3 potential LinkedIn posts, and then you can just see them all and take the one you like. That's always fun too.
So the art is in the prompt, but I think it's important to understand that everything we just went through in Ripe, we don't have to do all of that every single time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like how can I be, work smarter? And once I start to really hone in on my voice, so that so we're avoiding the whole like, it sounds like a robot. How can I rework that for the next time?
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect, we'll go to a third framework then. So we can call this the GPT 2x2 for now. I don't have a good name yet, so you can help me out.
Okay.
So imagine on the x-axis, on the horizontal, on the left side, we have single player, and on the right side, we have multiplayer. So are you just doing this yourself? So John's writing the LinkedIn post, or is it your marketing team and different people, different days are doing this, right? So that'd be single player versus multiplayer. And then on the bottom, on the y-axis, we have knowledge retrieval. So that's like, am I just asking random questions like, tell me about the history of XYZ, like things that I'm not going to do frequently? Or am I doing repetitive tasks at the top of the y-axis? So that would be like every day I'm creating LinkedIn posts. I'm going to do this more than once.
Yeah.
So like you said, the beauty of AI is that it'll learn our voice and what we like. And kind of like we talked about with the AI sandwich, you can go from a club sandwich down to a burger because you start figuring out the right questions and you can start to train it. So I think in the GPT 2x2, if you're just doing single player and you're just doing knowledge retrieval, so you're just asking questions like the bottom left.
Bottom left, yep.
Yep. I would recommend people try Perplexity, which is an AI Google replacement. So Perplexity is an awesome place to ask questions.
It's like a search bar, right? An AI search bar. Yep.
Yeah, and compared to Google, it will summarize a lot of results into one. So Google, you have 10 links, and you don't even always see what's in it. And compared to ChatGPT, it footnotes where it got the information. Yep. So
it's very academic, sort of, right?
Yeah, a little bit more academic feel. But if I say how big is the solar system, it'll give me an answer, and I can just take that answer. But I could also click the footnotes, go to the web page, and confirm the site that it's from.
Okay.
So single player knowledge, use Perplexity. Now, if you're going to do single player repetitive tasks, that's where you would want to do what are called GPTs. So a GPT is a generative pre-trained transformer. So most famous example would be ChatGPT, right? So that's a GPT. But you can, if you have the paid plan, actually create custom versions of ChatGPT in the GPT store. So why would you do that? A custom version of a GPT would be pre-trained on the thing that you're going to ask it to do. So instead of having to go through the role inquiry parameter example, you could actually pre-do all of that. And then when you jump in, you just write Scott Meyer leadership, and it would create the LinkedIn post because it already knows the question. It already knows all of that. If you're not
Yeah.
paying, for ChatGPT, that's okay. You can actually use the free version, and it'll keep a history of all of your chats, and ChatGPT remembers those conversations. So the trick is you have to click into the previous chat you've already used,
Yep.
and it'll keep that history and it'll use those as examples.
So maybe the right way to think of that is essentially we're like, we've already built that conversation through Ripe. Put that hat on. Put the I'm a doctor in Louisville, Kentucky, whatever, and then work off of that. Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's probably the option most people will want to use, because if you're already using ChatGPT, like your information's in there and you can quickly go in and just like ask something else.
And that was
But it's not
even
always
that idea of
the
pre-train. Our
fastest.
other brother Paul sort of changed my perspective on that. I think an interesting use case is we think of large language models. I think of like the internet. Like what makes these AI so
Yeah.
special is it's like they're trained on every book ever written, but they don't have to be. Like in this case, he uploaded the handbook to his daughter, our niece's daycare, and just wanted to not have to reference a large document. So he would just ask questions of
Yeah.
like, what time's drop off, or what days are holidays this year? And it would just, fire it right back. I thought that was brilliant.
Exactly. Yep. Only paid. So that's only for paid
Those are
users,
saved,
which is
yeah.
why we want to use Chip. That's where we can get to on the right side now. So that's a perfect use case. Yeah. So it's like you don't lose the history of the internet. That's almost like the underlining knowledge.
Yeah.
But you can add to it. So your HR documents or your travel plans for next week, or your your handbook for your preschool, like it probably doesn't have that because it's private or is very new.
Mhm.
So you can add it in, and then it'll fill in with all of its knowledge from history up till April 23. Yeah.
And is that where like this, you mentioned the word earlier, but hallucinations, if we're not being specific in our prompts, it's going to go back onto its knowledge of the internet and potentially give you an answer it thinks it wants?
Yeah, because really, I mean, it's hard to understand this, but what it's doing is predicting the next characters, right? It's not even it's not pulling results like Google. Like it's
Yeah.
not going to find the best answer, but it's basically predicting it off of what people have said in the past. So if you're asking what the policy of Bright Horizons preschool or something is, it's going to probably look at other preschool
Mhm.
documents and suggest what that is, and it's probably going to be pretty close.
Yeah, that's
but
where we get in trouble, is we just assume it's right. And most
Yeah.
of the time it is, I suppose. But
Yeah, right-ish. And probably more right than humans, right? Like we hallucinate all the time when we're telling people
Sure.
stuff, but there's a different expectations with computers, and I think that's what's fascinating with AI is that computers have always been zeros or ones, so it's right or wrong, and now we're in this like on the positive side, you could call it creative phase. On the negative side, you could call it hallucinatory phase. But it's generating new ideas that aren't necessarily one or the other. It's in between.
it's a good point, though, how often we're like, yeah, I think I read somewhere that,
Yeah,
like in conversation,
exactly.
and then everybody around the table just takes it as fact.
Yeah. I mean, think about old bar games, right? When you would go to the bar and you'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure he had the most home runs in history. And everyone's like, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Just take people at fact. And now
Move
it's a
on.
very different world.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so the left side vertically is the single player mode, but now for moving multi.
Yeah, so multiplayer mode is thinking about how do you integrate AI into an organization or company. And I'd say this is actually where the biggest gap is right now. So
Sure.
a lot of people have played with AI. Most people are not getting business value from it. And if they are, they're probably doing it individually, like they're finding themselves their daily tasks.
Yeah, I find like that individuals within companies are becoming more productive, not because of
Yeah.
the structure around them.
Yeah. So, what we're trying to do at Chip and what I've been doing, for over a year personally is helping people integrate AI and get real business value from it. And so I would think about this as multiplayer and repetitive. So, on the multiplayer side, well, let's start on the bottom right. So that would be
Knowledge.
single player and repetitive.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'd be single player on the
Oh yeah, I
y-axis and then
described that
repetitive on the right.
incorrectly. Yeah, sorry.
So you could think about, you probably have tasks that you do often, like LinkedIn posts for a Leadmore podcast.
Mhm.
As an individual, you could just go to ChatGPT and ask it to create for it, but you'd maybe want to automate that because you're doing it a lot.
Yeah.
And you want to do it in your own voice. And so the trick here is going to be using Zapier and ChatGPT. So again, if you're doing single player and repetition, you're going to set up an automated task. So every time you upload a podcast to Google Drive, it's going to automatically send that into ChatGPT. It'll transcribe it, and then it'll write a summary, and then it'll put the summary into a spreadsheet for you or put it onto a Google Doc for you. So that'd be like the idea of, automating a task that you individually do by yourself. So I'll pause there, but you would need to have a paid Zapier account, which is about $20 a month. You could do it on the free ChatGPT account.
Yeah. I mean, what you just described, I think people are, if you're a hacker or a tinkerer, you can do that yourself pretty easily.
Yeah.
But people are probably building businesses just around that quadrant right now, like agencies,
for sure.
consulting companies, vertically integrated, whatever, specialist. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So you can automate a lot of that, but it's not something someone could just jump into. You need to have those emails connected to your account, and you need to have those accounts set up. And so then we go to the top right then. So that would be, for multiplayer and repetitive tasks. And that's where I would recommend using Chipp. And so what Chipp does is allows you to create custom ChatGPTs for your business that anyone can use. So they don't have to be paid subscribers to ChatGPT to get it. Whereas, if you want to use one of those GPTs, like on the GPT store, you have to be a paid subscriber. And also there's no way to use those anywhere else. So you can think multiplayer mode, you're going to want to bring those tools into your business website, into your Notion document, into your Circle, if you have a course, if you're a consultant. So Chipp allows you to build branded custom ChatGPTs that you can put anywhere. If you want to sell them, you can. If you want to track who uses them to generate leads, you can. And most importantly, anyone can use it. And so what we think about with this multiplayer mode is you're not prompting the AI as much as you're prompting the AI to ask the user questions. So instead of saying, you are a SEO creator writing a blog post about leadership podcast, you would tell the AI, ask the user, how they want you to behave, ask them what they're trying to create, and then ask them if they have any data points they want to add into, and then write a LinkedIn post on what they gave you as answers.
And so are we back to the sandwich there, where it's like kind of like playing tennis, hitting it back and forth?
Yeah, exactly. But it's almost, technically you're starting with the human because you're training it initially. But if I jump onto the page and I'm a non-technical, admin person at your company, I don't need to start the conversation. I actually answer. And so the AI asks me, what are we trying to do today? Okay, we're trying to write a LinkedIn post. Okay, do you have any details? No. Okay, here's some details. Do you want any of these? Yes, I want the second one. All right, how's this draft look? It looks good. Do you want me to put it somewhere? No, I'll just copy it. So it's, again, that's the AI for people who hate AI, because they don't have to do anything. It's just asking, it's having a conversation sparked by an AI tool, which is quite interesting. So,
and is the order of those questions created by the company, or the AI just knows what it needs?
Yeah, so that's what Chipp allows you to do, is to create the training essentially behind it. And you can do it two ways. Like, one is you can come up with it yourself. The second is we actually have a template library. So we have about 100 different bots already built. And you can just take one of those and either just straight up use it, or you can take it. And what most people do is then just change a few details based on your use case. So typically what we're seeing is like companies have one or two people who are somewhat technical or somewhat interested. And then what they can do is just build these for their entire team. So and there was a great MIT study that showed, AI increases productivity about 40%, but it's disproportionately for younger, newer hires, so less talented. And this is a great example where the least technical person can now get the benefits of AI without having to learn AI. And so it's a floor raiser rather than a ceiling raiser. And you can imagine your most technically interested person is using it already, and now they can just share what they're doing with everybody, so everyone gets the benefit.
Yeah, I've heard the sort of provocative line of like, your job's not going to be replaced by AI, but it's going to be replaced by somebody using AI. And that does seem to have a disproportionate advantage to the younger, maybe more tech natives who are tinkering, but this would allow that knowledge transfer across an organization.
Yeah, and we're hoping across organizations with Chipp, right? So like we're essentially trying to build out the equivalent of like Notion templates or WordPress plugins, where the best tools you're building can now be shared. And unlike the GPT store, anyone can use them regardless of if they're paying or not. And then also it could be something you sell, right? So if you come up with a really awesome social media creator, I could buy that from you for $5, $10, whatever.
Cool.
And now you're building a business, and that person's able to launch without spending a lot of time.
Awesome. So like a marketplace to come, or some place to find these
Yeah.
different
We're
templates.
calling it our ecosystem. So you can see them now, and next is kind of adding in the payment opportunity. Yeah.
Cool. So let's close. So we have the sandwich as a way to think about how to work with AI.
Yeah.
We have Ripe as the prompt sort of framework to kind of get the best questions and get the best results. And then this 2x2 matrix sort of tells us maybe which tools to use, or how to interact with, or how to connect all of our tools.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I just think, it's early days, but we're starting to see tools become more specified, and it's going to, I think, continue to go that way. So while most people have played with ChatGPT, which is great, I think it's important to also try out a few other tools, because there's a big difference between, knowledge retrieval and repetitive tasks, and you can save even more time and maybe think a little bit less by sharpening the axe, taking time to set up what you need, and then use that over and over.
Well, it seems like the future is the builders, the entrepreneurs, making all of this just more seamless and sort of native into our everyday life, right? So like, whether it be our phone or our voice, or just like the layers of technology become more dissolved.
Yeah, I think, the reason why we made Chipp where people can put it anywhere is you can create a front end to make it look however you want. If you're a paid user, our brand goes away completely. And so you could imagine where it's like, everybody puts in their availability for work next week, and it spits out like the schedule, and they don't know that it's AI behind the scenes doing that, right? Like they're just literally filling out a form or typing in information or speaking information, and then it just does the work that nobody really wants to do, like figuring out the schedule at the coffee shop or whatever.
Yep.
So I think that's kind of where things will go, is that AI is abstracted away. And most of us are just going to use it without knowing it. And then a few of us are going to like actually use these things to build. But all of us benefit.
Awesome. Well, congrats on the recent raise. Excited to see where Chipp goes from here. Thanks for making us all a little more educated about AI.
Yeah, try it out. Happy to help. We're at Chipp.ai and always love questions. So bring them our way, and check out our YouTube channel for tutorials on how to get started.
Cool. Thanks, Scott.
Yep. See ya.
All right, that was today's episode of the Leadmore Podcast. Thanks for listening to Scott and I, and I hope that you can find some ways to integrate AI in your life. I think it's one of those things that I just highly encourage you to tinker with it, to spend some time. I think all of us are probably underinvested in AI, and I don't mean like financially in your stock portfolio, although if you own some NVIDIA stock, that's good for you. But just in the time, like I think we need to at least tinker with and explore. I like the line of, your job won't be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by somebody using AI, someone who comes along and knows how to use these tools, isn't afraid of these tools, but understands how to become 10x their productivity because of this stuff. That's what I encourage you to do. All right, if you're listening to Leadmore Podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, I would encourage you, hit that subscribe button below. I'm trying to grow my YouTube this year, and I'm trying to invest in the quality and the production and continue to get better and better. So I would love your support. More great videos to come, where we release a video every week, either the podcast or an educational video. So hit subscribe so you don't miss. Thanks so much. Take care and be well.